Hi everybody, I'm Susan Mulvihill. Today is my third and final video about how to prune your tomato plants so you'll get as many ripe tomatoes by the end of your season as possible. As a quick recap, I start my three-step pruning process roughly 6 weeks before the first anticipated fall frost. During that first pruning, I am cutting back the tall growth that the plants have put on that contains a lot of flowers, maybe tiny little tomatoes, but ones that you know are not going to be ripe by the end of your growing season. In the second video, I pruned them again, and mainly I was trying to open up the plants so that the tomatoes got more sunlight, and I also cut back on the amount of water that the tomato beds were getting by 50%. So today we're going to get more drastic. Not too long after I did the first pruning, I suddenly had more ripe tomatoes, harvested them, and we made about a half a gallon of tomato sauce. Now I have to say, ordinarily, in a regular year, we would get gallons and gallons of tomato sauce. But this year, because of our extreme heat and exceptional drought, and maybe also some wildfire smoke thrown in, we have gotten a much smaller harvest. But even so, I'm getting one that I'm pretty happy with, so I shouldn't complain. Now, after that second pruning, we also got a lot more ripe tomatoes, and you won't see them on the plants here because I harvested them, and we made a little more than a half a gallon of tomato sauce in that second crop. And here's my photographic proof. Now here in Spokane, Washington, where it's between zone 5B and 6, we typically get our first frost around the middle of September, and that is not far off at all. And so I really need to do some drastic things today in order to get the last of the tomatoes to ripen in time. And even if they don't, and if yours don't, I have something you can do so that you'll still get red tomatoes from them. So the first thing I'm going to do, and this is the same as the last two videos, except a little more extreme, I am going to cut off a lot of branches. At this point, I know that only the big tomatoes are going to make it by the end of the season. So, for example, you see this one. Those are not going to make it by the end of the season. I can't even take them inside and get them to ripen. They are not going to make it. So off they go. So I want to cut back this excess foliage, and quite extremely, I might add. And also cut any leaves off that are covering tomatoes that I'm trying to get to ripen. So this pruning step takes a little bit longer because I'm really having to show the plants who's boss and get those tomatoes to ripen. So any leaves that are covering a nice tomato need to be pruned off. Now, if you accidentally lop off a nice tomato like this, don't despair. Just set it aside and I'll tell you what to do with it so that it will ripen for you. The main thing that you're wanting to save are tomatoes that are full size or really close to it, because those have the greatest success of ripening by the end of the season or indoors for you. I'm taking off a lot of foliage, but it's okay. They're at the end of their season, and the name of the game now is how many red tomatoes can I get? Whew, that was close. I've got 3 nice tomatoes on that branch. Oh, okay, now they're not on the branch. I'm going to set these aside and take them indoors. Whoops. See, it happens to all of us. Now you can see that I've gotten more sunlight on some of the tomatoes, and that is going to help them ripen sooner. And it's always good to have good airflow around them as well. So I've gotten this first bed done. It looks pretty sparse, I have to admit. And now I have 2 other beds to do the same routine to. Now, as I mentioned in my last tomato pruning video, Bill put a drip system to each bed, and each one includes a valve, and that sure makes life easy for turning the water on or off or adjusting it down. So last time I turned the water down by about 50%. Now I'm going to completely turn it off to each of the beds. And that is going to stress the tomatoes. I know that doesn't sound very nice, but it's something that you need to do to get those last tomatoes to ripen. Now, if you're really getting desperate because your tomatoes just aren't ripening, there is another thing you can do that involves a shovel. Locate the base of your tomato plant where the main stem is and go out in a half circle about 8 inches from the little trunk. And then take your shovel and cut straight down through the roots. Now, tomato roots do not go super deep, so you don't have to cut really far. But you're doing this just in a half circle on one side of the plant. What this does is it really stresses the plants, and the tomatoes will ripen. Now, let's say a frost is imminent and you've got all sorts of green tomatoes still left on your plants. Or like me, you accidentally knocked some off of the plants while you were doing your radical pruning. Don't worry. All you have to do is take them indoors to a dark, cool spot, place them on sheets of newspaper, and always put them a couple of inches apart, and believe it or not, they will ripen. Now, if the area you're taking them into is not super dark, go ahead and put sheets of newspaper on top of the tomatoes as well. That will do the trick. Check them often, and you will be amazed at how well they ripen. Okay, I need to finish up my tomato pruning. I hope you get a ton of ripe tomatoes using this method. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. I'll see you next week.